The world stood still as the signal blared through the command center. The message was clear, an urgent cry for help from the stars, a distress beacon sent out from a distant alien world, reaching the human ear for the first time in years. The message was almost incomprehensible, garbled static cut through the transmission. But one thing was certain: the alien king had been captured. His people had called on humanity for aid, and they had no time to waste. The news spread like wildfire across the military ranks. But it was one team that was chosen to answer the call: the elite female SWAT team, known for their precision, courage, and brutal efficiency. No mission was too dangerous, no enemy too powerful. The women, who had trained together for years, now faced their greatest test. Yet Sergeant Riley Stone, the leader of the team, was already moving to the briefing room, her mind racing with thoughts of what they were about to face. The alien king had once saved Earth from an unstoppable force of invaders. A war that humanity had barely survived. Their alliance was a beacon of hope in the galaxy, and now it was in jeopardy. The mission was clear: infiltrate the enemy's stronghold, rescue the alien king, and escape before reinforcements arrived. Riley's team was the best and the brightest. They had fought together for years. But this was no ordinary rescue mission. This was a call to arms to protect an alliance that had once saved their very existence. They couldn't afford failure. The SWAT team assembled quickly in the briefing room, their faces grim but determined. They knew the stakes, they knew what was at risk, but they were ready. Each member of the team stood tall and silent, waiting for Riley to speak. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Riley paced in front of the map of the alien world, her mind already calculating the path they would take. The coordinates of the enemy stronghold flashed on the screen. The location of the king's imprisonment, a twisted fortress surrounded by layers of defense, advanced technology, and alien weaponry. The team knew they would be outnumbered and outgunned, but they also knew that enemies would never anticipate them. They were human, and that was their greatest strength. Riley turned to her team, her voice calm but laced with steel. The mission had already begun. There would be no turning back now. She spoke of the alien king's importance and the need for discretion. The king had been a beacon of hope for his people and for humanity. He was a symbol of the strength of their alliance. They had to rescue him, not just for the sake of the mission, but for the future of both worlds. The team nodded in understanding, their leader's words resonating deep within them. They were ready for whatever came next. Riley's second in command, Lieutenant Maya Devereux, was a woman of few words, but when she spoke, it was always with precision. Maya had been with Riley since the early days of their training. Both women had fought their way up the ranks, earning the respect of their peers. Maya was the tactical genius behind the team's success. She had studied every inch of the alien fortress and designed a plan that would give them the best chance of success. Maya's eyes locked with Riley's as the plan was presented, every move calculated, every escape route planned to perfection. The rest of the team, including sniper Eliza Hulk, tech expert Zoe Black, and close combat specialist Rachel Valdez, all knew their roles. The tension had lifted as the plan was set into motion. But there was no time to waste. They had to move fast. Once the mission was underway, they wouldn't have time to second-guess themselves. The alien world they were about to enter was hostile and unknown, but their resolve was unshakable. They had trained for this their entire lives, and they would not let fear stop them. They loaded into the transport shuttle and made their way toward the planet's surface. As the shuttle broke through the atmosphere, the landscape below them was unlike anything they had seen before. Jagged alien terrains stretched for miles beneath a blood-red sky. The air was thick with an otherworldly presence. The planet felt alive with danger, and the team knew they were about to step into the unknown. The gravity of the mission settled in, but Riley could feel the strength of her team, their unity, and their purpose. They were more than just soldiers. They were the last hope for the alien king and his people. They were humanity's defenders, and they would not fail. The transport shuttle slammed through the atmosphere, shaking violently as it descended toward the surface of the alien world. Riley gripped the edge of her seat, her eyes never leaving the readouts on the control panel. The rest of the team remained silent but tense, their focus unwavering. Outside the window, the alien landscape stretched out below them, jagged mountains and twisted structures scattered across the barren expanse. The air felt wrong, thick and heavy like the planet itself, was waiting for something to happen. Riley could sense the danger. It was closing in. As the shuttle made its final approach, she looked at her team, each one a master of their craft. But this mission was different. This was not just about tactics or skill. This was about survival. Every instinct told her that they would be facing something unlike anything they had encountered. Before the shuttle touched down with a heavy thud, the doors hissed open, and the team was out in an instant. They moved like a single unit, the cold alien soil underfoot, the sounds of the world around them alien, but familiar. The smell of sulfur and burnt metal filled the air. The team was ready. But they knew this was only the beginning. Riley's eyes scanned the horizon. She could see the outline of the fortress in the distance, its spires reaching into the sky, like the fingers of some great beast. They would need to cross miles of open terrain to reach the base. But they were prepared. The first obstacle came quickly, a squadron of enemy drones. Moving in from the west, their glowing red eyes scanning the area, the team immediately fell into formation. Riley signaled Maya, and within seconds the team was moving without a sound. They had trained for this moment. Every step calculated, every movement precise. Maya led the way, her eyes sharp and focused. She knew the terrain better than anyone. She led the team through the shadows of alien rock formations, avoiding the drones that hovered just above the ground. Maya's expertise in stealth kept them hidden. They knew they couldn't afford to be seen. The drones would alert the enemy, and they didn't have the firepower to fight them all if they were discovered. The team moved swiftly, keeping to the low ground and using the jagged alien landscape for cover. It was a delicate balance. One wrong step, and they would be exposed. But Riley trusted her team, and they trusted each other. Their training had made them one unit, and together they could overcome anything. Maya held up a fist, signaling the team to stop. She crouched low to the ground, examining the drone patterns. It seemed that they would have to wait for the perfect moment to strike. The drones were unpredictable and would have to be dealt with silently. Eliza raised her sniper rifle, her eyes narrowing as she calculated the perfect shot. Zoe was already hacking into the drone systems, her fingers flying across the portable keyboard. As she infiltrated the enemy network, the team could hear the soft hum of the drones as they hovered in the air, each drone just a few yards away from their hiding place. It was a tense moment. Eliza's rifle was trained on the nearest drone, and Zoe's fingers hovered above the keys, ready to disable them. In one clean sweep, the seconds felt like hours, a sound of the drone's movements growing louder by the second. Then Zoe's voice cut through the silence. "I have control," she whispered. A beat passed, and then Eliza took the shot. A single bullet from her sniper rifle pierced the nearest drone, causing it to drop to the ground. In a cloud of sparks, the rest of the drones hesitated for a moment, unsure of what had just happened. Zoe quickly sent a pulse to disable the remaining drones, and within seconds the entire squadron crashed to the ground, leaving only silence in their wake. The team didn't celebrate. There was no time for that. They moved on quickly. Maya led them forward through the alien wilderness, each step bringing them closer to their goal. The fortress loomed larger in the distance, a dark and imposing structure that seemed to absorb the light around it. The team could feel the weight of the mission settling over them. The closer they got, the more intense. The air seemed to grow, the atmosphere thick with anticipation and danger. The enemy had to know they were coming. But Riley didn't falter. Her mind was clear, and her focus unwavering. She knew what was at stake. They were the only ones who could save the alien king, and they would stop at nothing to complete their mission. The team pressed forward through the alien terrain, the sky above them a blood-red hue, the air thick and heavy with an unnatural heat. The fortress was now only a few miles away, but every step felt like an eternity. The silence around them was deafening, broken only by the occasional hum of alien machines hidden in the distance. The landscape stretched out endlessly before them, a twisted mix of rocks and alien plant life that seemed to pulse with an eerie life of its own. The team moved swiftly and silently through the hostile environment. Their senses heightened. Every sound, every movement was a potential threat, but they knew they couldn't slow down. Their objective was in sight. The closer they got, the more the sense of danger intensified. They were almost at the outer edge of the fortress when Maya held up her fist, signaling the team to stop ahead. A group of enemy soldiers patrolled the entrance to the stronghold, their bodies armored in strange alien material, their weapons at the ready. They were heavily armed and dangerous. Riley's mind raced as she analyzed their position. The team had to find a way inside without alerting the enemy. If they were discovered, it would be game over. They couldn't afford to engage in a full-scale battle. The element of surprise was their greatest asset. Riley turned to Maya, her second in command. Maya nodded and silently pointed to a narrow path that led up the side of the fortress. It was risky, but it might be their only option. Riley signaled the team to follow, and they moved quickly, taking the narrow path that would hopefully lead them inside. Undetected, the soldiers at the entrance remained unaware of their presence. The team made their way upward, using the rocky terrain for cover. Moving like shadows, they climbed carefully, their hands steady as they reached the higher ground. Once there, they were able to get a better view of the fortress's defenses. The walls were lined with advanced weaponry, automated turrets aimed at anyone who approached the front. The air was thick with the hum of energy shields that protected the base from all angles. Riley could see the Alien King's prison from this height, a small dark window at the far side of the fortress, barely visible from their position. They had to move fast, but carefully. One wrong move, and the alarms would sound. The enemy would be all over them. Maya silently gestured for the team to wait while she scouted ahead. She moved with the fluidity of a predator, her every step calculated as she crept toward the fortress's outer walls. Within minutes, Maya returned with a new plan. There was a maintenance tunnel just below the surface, hidden by a false rock formation. It was their best chance to get inside without being seen. The team quickly gathered their equipment and made their way toward the tunnel. Riley's mind raced, the pressure mounting. They were so close to their goal, but every second counted. The closer they got, the more intense the feeling of being watched grew. It was as if the planet itself was aware of their presence. Maya was the first to enter the tunnel, followed by Eliza and Zoe, who kept watch for any signs of movement. Rachel brought up the rear, her eyes constantly scanning the area for threats. The tunnel was dark and narrow, the air stale as it echoed with the sound of their footsteps. The walls were damp and cold, but the team pushed forward with determination, knowing there was no turning back now. The path was slow and winding, each step taking them deeper into the heart of the enemy stronghold. They had to remain quiet, their breathing shallow, as they navigated the dark corridor. But even as they moved deeper into the base, the sense of danger grew stronger. Riley could feel it in the air. The feeling of being watched never left them. As they neared their destination, the walls of the tunnel began to vibrate faintly, a low hum that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. It was as if the fortress was alive and aware of their presence. Still, they moved forward, their steps steady, their focus unwavering. Maya signaled for the team to halt. Ahead was the entrance to the main compound. They could hear voices and the sound of alien machinery whirring softly. Riley's eyes narrowed as she listened carefully. The enemy was close. They had no choice now. They would have to break through and move fast. Time was running out. The team crouched in the shadows, their bodies pressed against the cold stone walls. As they listened to the movement ahead, the low murmur of alien voices drifted through the tunnel, the sound of boots clanking against the metal floor. A pair of enemy soldiers patrolling the compound. The team had to move quickly, but carefully. They couldn't risk detection. The plan had always been to infiltrate quietly and avoid direct confrontation as much as possible. Riley's eyes scanned the dark corridor ahead, her mind working fast, analyzing their options. The soldiers were getting closer. She signaled for Maya to move forward quietly, and Maya disappeared into the shadows like a ghost, moving faster than the others could follow. The rest of the team held their breath as Maya moved between the soldiers, her every step a perfect balance of grace and precision. The soldiers continued to patrol, unaware of the threat, moving silently behind them. Maya reached the first soldier in the hallway. She waited for the perfect moment, then struck with lightning speed. The soldier crumpled to the ground, with barely a sound, his weapon clattering to the floor. The second soldier turned at the noise, but it was too late. Maya was already on him. The second soldier was subdued. Just as quickly, Maya dragged the bodies into the darkness and signaled to the team to move. Riley led the way as they moved into the next chamber, their footsteps muffled by the thick air and the sound of machinery all around them. The interior of the fortress was nothing like they had imagined. Sleek metallic walls stretched high above them. Strange alien devices hummed softly, sending waves of energy through the air. The team remained focused. As they pushed forward, Riley knew they couldn't afford to be distracted. They were close. The alien king's prison was within their reach. The team moved through the dark hallways with practiced efficiency, each one knowing their role. Riley led them through a series of corridors that twisted and turned in ways that seemed to defy logic. The architecture of the fortress was alien to anything they had seen before. The walls curved in unnatural ways, and rooms seemed to stretch endlessly in impossible directions. They had to keep their bearings or risk getting lost in the maze-like structure. Maya checked her scanner and pointed to a door ahead. It was heavily guarded, but it was the only way forward. Riley made a quick decision and gestured to Eliza to take out the guards with precision. Eliza took position just behind a corner, her sniper rifle ready. In an instant, she aimed at the guards without hesitation. The first guard dropped silently as the shot hit its mark. The second guard didn't have time to react before the second shot rang out. Both of them were down before they knew what had happened. Riley signaled for the team to move, and they quickly entered the room and found themselves in front of a large energy shield that seemed to be protecting the king's cell. It was unlike anything they had seen before, an intricate web of energy that shimmered in the dim light. Maya immediately got to work analyzing the shield's frequency. So was by her side, hacking into the system to disable the barrier. They had expected this, but the shield was far more advanced than anything they had encountered. It took longer than anticipated, but soon enough Maya and Zoe had pinpointed the weak point in the system, and with a press of a button the shield flickered and collapsed. The team moved quickly inside the cell. The king lay unconscious on the floor, his body weak, but still alive. The energy from the shield had clearly drained him, but he was not dead. The team circled around him, their eyes scanning for any sign of danger, but the room seemed deserted. Riley kneeled beside the king, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. She could feel the weight of the moment, the significance of their mission. They had come for him, and they would leave with him, no matter the cost. Maya was already assessing the king's condition, making sure he could stand. Eliza kept watch on the hallway, ensuring there were no more surprises. So worked quickly to gather information on the alien technology that had been used to imprison the king. Rachel remained alert, her eyes constantly scanning for threats. Riley stood and made the call. It was time to move. They had what they came for now. They just had to escape. The king stirred slightly, his eyes fluttering open as the team stood around him, the weight of his captivity still heavy on his body. The look in his eyes was one of recognition and gratitude. He knew they had come for him, and that knowledge filled him with a new sense of strength. He tried to rise, but his body was weak, his muscles strained against the effects of the energy drain that had kept him imprisoned for so long. Riley crouched beside him, her voice calm and steady. "You're safe now," she whispered. The king nodded weakly, his eyes scanning the team before resting on Riley. They had saved him, and he knew it would not go unnoticed. The alliance would be solidified through their actions, but they couldn't stay here much longer. They needed to move fast. Maya scanned the room, looking for the best escape route. She motioned for the team to gather as she quickly mapped out their next move. The enemy was sure to have noticed the shield's collapse, and they wouldn't be far behind. Eliza positioned herself by the door, keeping her sniper rifle trained on the hallway ahead. Rachel positioned herself in the rear, her eyes focused on every shadow, every flicker of movement, while Zoe worked quickly to disable any other traps or security measures that might slow them down. Time was running out every second. They stayed in the fortress, increased the risk of a full-scale confrontation. Maya turned to Riley. "There's a maintenance shaft that leads out on the far side of the base. It's a narrow path, but we'll be able to get out undetected if we move now." Riley gave a brief nod. She trusted Maya's judgment without question, and together they moved, the king between them, his steps shaky but growing stronger as they made their way toward the exit. The path to the maintenance shaft was treacherous, every corner a potential threat, every shadow hiding an enemy waiting for them to slip up. The tension in the air was suffocating, but the team moved with precision, each member knowing their role, each one focused on the task ahead. They had no choice but to trust in their training and each other. When they reached the shaft, Maya was the first to climb in her life form, easily slipping through the narrow opening. Riley followed next with the king in tow. Each movement, deliberate and quiet. The team was in the shaft, now making their way through the cramped space, with the sound of their breathing the only noise that broke the silence. The walls were slick with moisture, and the air was thick with the smell of damp metal. But they didn't stop. They couldn't afford to. Riley kept her eyes on the rear of the group, watching for any sign of pursuit. Eliza was close behind her rifle, ready. Zoe kept a close eye on their surroundings, ensuring the tunnel remained secure, while Rachel took the lead behind Maya. As they moved through the labyrinthine tunnel, the shaft began to twist and turn, disorienting them. As they ventured deeper into the belly of the fortress, a path was narrow and dangerous, but they had no choice but to press forward. The noise of their movements was swallowed by the walls, but Riley knew they couldn't risk being caught in a trap. The enemy would be on high alert. By now, the maintenance shaft opened into a large room filled with alien machinery. Strange glowing devices hummed with an eerie energy they had to get through without alerting anyone. Maya signaled for the team to stop ahead. She could hear the sound of footsteps echoing in the distance. Enemy soldiers were patrolling the area, and they were getting closer. The team immediately huddled behind the machinery, using the large alien devices for cover. Their breathing shallow, their bodies frozen in place. The footsteps drew nearer. Riley held her breath, willing the seconds to stretch out just long enough for the soldiers to pass. She could feel the tension in her chest, but her eyes never left the path ahead. One wrong move, and they'd be exposed. The footsteps grew louder, then faded into the distance. The soldiers had passed. The team moved again, quickly and silently, with the king now walking under his own strength. They were getting closer to the exit, but every step forward felt like a gamble. They hadn't made it yet. The fortress was still full of dangers, and they had no idea how much time they had before the enemy realized what was happening. The team moved swiftly through the darkened corridors, their bodies tense but focused. The king now walking beside them, his pace steady, but still weaker than it should have been. The fortress loomed around them, its cold walls closing in, but they couldn't stop. They couldn't afford to slow down. The sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. The low hum of machinery filled the air, but they pressed on. The exit was in sight, but every turn brought new dangers. The team's senses were heightened as they navigated the base, the weight of the mission still heavy on their minds. They had to get the king out alive. The pressure of the moment was suffocating, but they remained calm and coordinated. They moved through the hallways with speed and precision. Maya led the way, her eyes constantly scanning for any signs of danger. She was always one step ahead, making sure the path was clear before signaling the rest of the team. Riley's eyes were locked on the king. His exhaustion was clear, but he was determined to keep moving. His presence, a quiet reminder of the gravity of their mission. They couldn't let him fall behind. They couldn't fail. Maya turned a corner and held up a fist, signaling the team to stop. Riley tensed her hand, going to her sidearm. The sound of voices carried through the corridor, the unmistakable chatter of enemy soldiers. They were close, too close. Riley's mind raced. They couldn't risk being discovered. Not now. Not when they were so close. Maya motioned for the team to follow. As she ducked into a small alcove, hidden from view, they pressed against the cold stone walls, their breaths shallow as they waited for the soldiers to pass. The tension in the air was unbearable. The only sound was the pounding of their hearts. The soldiers moved past them, unaware of their presence. The team stayed perfectly still, waiting until the last echo of footsteps faded into the distance. Then they moved again, quickly and quietly. Maya was the first to peek around the corner, her eyes scanning the next hallway ahead. It was clear for now. Riley motioned for the team to keep moving. The king was still with them, his eyes locked ahead as he walked beside Riley, but Riley could see the strain in his every step. She knew he was on the verge of collapse. But there was no time to stop, no time to rest. Their window was closing. They had to get him out now. As they neared the outer perimeter of the fortress, Maya signaled for them to take cover. They were in the final stretch. But the enemy wasn't far behind. The sound of vehicles approaching made the air hum with tension. The team crouched low behind a series of metal crates, their bodies pressed to the ground. As they listened, the engines were growing louder, the hum of alien technology signaling the arrival of reinforcements. They couldn't afford to be caught in the open. Maya's eyes flicked to Riley. She knew their only option now was to push forward with speed and precision. They had to reach the transport shuttle waiting just beyond the fortress walls. Riley nodded, her grip tightening around her weapon. She wasn't going to let anything stop them. Now Zoe had already hacked into the fortress's security system, disabling the outer defenses. They had a brief window before the enemy knew what was happening. The team moved like a well-oiled machine. Riley kept a close eye on the rear, making sure no one was trailing them. While Maya led them through the final stretch of the compound, they had to move fast. They could feel the enemy closing in. But the exit was so close now. The heavy doors of the fortress loomed ahead. The teens' hearts pounded in their chests. But they didn't hesitate. Maya approached the doors and quickly disabled the final security measure with a flick of her wrist. The doors hissed open. Just as the sound of enemy vehicles grew louder, the team rushed through the doors and into the night air. The cold wind hit them like a slap to the face. But it was a welcome relief. They were free for now. But their escape was far from certain. Ahead of them, the transport shuttle was waiting, hovering just off the ground. The pilot was ready, but the team had to move fast. Enemy reinforcements were closing in, and they had no time to waste as they sprinted toward the shuttle. Riley's mind raced. They had the king. They had made it this far, but they weren't safe yet. They had to get him to safety, and that meant making it to the shuttle and out of enemy territory. The team sprinted toward the shuttle, their feet pounding against the ground, the sound of the enemy closing in growing louder with every passing second. The doors of the shuttle slid open just as they reached it, the pilot ready and waiting. But the moment they stepped inside, the sound of blaster fire erupted behind them. The shuttle lurched upward, the engines roaring to life as the doors closed just in time. Maya was the last one inside. She slammed the control panel shut, sealing them off from the enemy. The shuttle shot into the sky, its powerful engines propelling them away from the fortress. The team exhaled in unison, their bodies still tense as they watched the towering structure grow smaller in the distance. They had made it out, but they weren't out of danger yet. The enemy would be on their tail. Soon enough, Riley turned to the king, who was slumped in one of the seats. He was pale and weak, but his eyes were filled with determination. He knew they had risked everything to save him. But the battle was far from over. Riley's mind raced as she studied the readouts on the shuttle's control panel. The enemy's pursuit was already tracking their course. The shuttle would need to make an immediate jump to avoid being caught. She turned to the pilot. "We need to go off the grid now," she said. The pilot nodded, but didn't speak. Instead, he began to input the coordinates for the jump. As Riley glanced at her team, each one was still catching their breath. Eliza was checking her sniper rifle, her sharp eyes scanning the windows for any signs of pursuit. Zoe was at the comms console trying to hack into the enemy's tracking system. Maya stood by the door, her eyes never leaving the king, who was now resting but still awake, his gaze focused on the stars outside the shuttle windows. The silence in the cabin was broken by the sudden jolt of the shuttle as it made the jump to hyperspace. The stars outside the windows stretched into lines of white light before they vanished completely. Riley leaned back in her seat, letting out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The tension in her body didn't release, though the escape had been successful. But there were too many unknowns, too many dangers ahead. They weren't safe yet. Maya looked at her and nodded. "We've got a few hours before we can make the next jump. But after that we should be in the clear." Riley's eyes narrowed. "We can't take that for granted," she said. "We need to figure out where we're going from here. We can't just run forever." Maya turned to the rest of the team. "We need to regroup and come up with a plan. We have to get the king to safety and make sure we're not being tracked anymore." They all nodded in agreement. Riley looked over at the king, who was still resting but looking more alert now. His recovery was slow but steady. He was the key to everything, to the survival of their people and the success of their mission. But they couldn't afford to let their guard down. Not now. The shuttle continued to glide through hyperspace, a steady hum filling the cabin. But the calm outside didn't match the storm brewing inside. Riley's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden beep of the comms console. Zoe turned quickly, her fingers flying over the keys. The expression on her face was one of alarm. "There's something out there," she said, her voice tense. Riley was on her feet in an instant. "What is it?" Zoe's eyes flicked to the screen. "It's a scout ship, one of theirs. It's been following us the whole time." Riley's heart sank. They'd been tracked the whole time, but she knew they couldn't outrun the scout ship in hyperspace. They'd have to engage the enemy in some way. They couldn't let them find the king. It was too dangerous. She turned to the team. "Maya, Eliza, get ready for a fight. We're going to need all hands on deck, so bring up everything we can on that ship. Find out how they're tracking us." Maya and Eliza moved to their stations as Riley took the pilot's seat, her fingers dancing across the controls as she worked to shape their pursuer. Maya and Eliza's weapons were ready, the shuttle's defenses primed. But Riley knew this would be a battle like none they had fought before. They couldn't afford to let the scout ship find them. They needed a plan, and they needed it now. Riley's hands flew over the controls, her mind working in overdrive as she tried to shake the enemy off their tail. The scout ship was close, far too close. And it was obvious that they knew the shuttle was running on minimal defenses. She could feel the tension in the air as the team prepared for the inevitable conflict. Eliza and Maya were positioned by the door's weapons, drawn, their eyes trained on the outside world, ready for whatever came through. Zoe had managed to hack into the enemy's tracking system, but it was a temporary fix at best. The scout ship was still locked onto them, and that meant trouble. Riley's voice was calm but firm. "Get us out of here, Zoe. Find a way to jam their sensors, or we won't get another chance." Zoe's fingers were a blur as she worked the console, her eyes scanning the data streaming across the screen. "I'm trying, but it's not going to be easy. Their systems are advanced." Riley's teeth clenched as she stared at the screen. They couldn't keep running forever. They needed to end this now. She flipped a switch, activating the shuttle's countermeasures. A small ship bucked and jerked as the defensive systems kicked in. Sensors began to scramble, and the ship's stealth mode engaged. It wasn't enough to throw the scout ship off completely, but it bought them precious seconds. Maya glanced over at Riley. "Stay sharp," she said. "The enemy is closing in." She knew it was only a matter of time before the scout ship would fire on them. Riley gripped the controls with white-knuckled intensity. If they were going to survive this, they had to outsmart their pursuer, not outrun it. She had an idea, one that could work, but it would be dangerous. She turned to Zoe. "Any luck on the tracking system?" Zoe nodded, but there was hesitation in her voice. "I've got a signal jam in place, but it's only temporary. The enemy will recalibrate soon. We have about 5 minutes at best." Riley didn't hesitate. "Then we use those 5 minutes," she said. "It's time to turn the tables. Maya, Eliza, get ready to board that scout ship. The rest of you stay focused. Zoe, keep the jamming going." Riley's plan was simple, but it relied on precise timing. They had to take the fight to the enemy and sabotage the scout ship before it could regroup with the rest of the enemy fleet. It wasn't going to be easy, but with everything on the line, they didn't have much choice. The shuttle shook again as the scout ship fired a warning shot, its aim off. But the message was clear. They had no intention of letting them escape. Riley slammed her fist against the console. "We're running out of time," she said. "Maya, Eliza, prepare to launch, so keep the jamming active until the last possible moment." Zoe nodded. She was working faster than ever, her fingers tapping the keys in rapid succession. While her eyes flicked between the data streams, Maya moved to the back of the shuttle, checking her weapons. One last time, Eliza was beside her, ready for action. The tension in the cabin was palpable, each person bracing themselves for what was to come. Riley's eyes remained fixed on the sensor readouts. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her. If this didn't work, they would be sitting ducks in space. But there was no time for second-guessing. The scout ship was within striking distance, and she knew it was now or never. Maya gave Riley a single nod, and Riley gave the order, "Execute." Riley flipped a switch, and the shuttle's thrusters roared to life with a sudden burst of speed. They veered sharply to the side, twisting violently as they evaded another blast from the scout ship. The shuttle hurtled toward the enemy vessel, its engines firing with all their might. Riley's pulse quickened. The move was risky, but it was the only way they could get close enough to board the scout ship before it could escape. Eliza was the first to launch. She flew from the shuttle's hatch with a rope attached to her gear, and swung across the gap between the two ships. Maya followed close behind as the shuttle kept its speed, and the jamming system continued to send false readings back to the enemy. Zoe's fingers danced over the keys as she worked furiously to keep the system from crashing. The tension was unbearable. Maya and Eliza were on the scout ship now, their boots hitting the metal surface with a resounding clang as they scrambled to get inside the small enemy vessel. Riley's eyes were fixed on the monitor, the sensors still scrambled. She had no idea what was happening on the scout ship, but she trusted her team. She had to. Maya and Eliza would disable it from the inside, or they wouldn't make it out alive. Riley's hands were tight on the controls, every fiber of her being focused on the task at hand. She couldn't afford to be distracted, not now, not when the fate of the mission was hanging by a thread. Maya and Eliza moved quickly, their boots scraping against the cold metal of the scout ship. As they made their way inside the tight corridors of the vessel, they didn't hesitate. Their mission clear, they had to disable the ship and give the team a fighting chance. Maya's sharp eyes scanned the darkened hallway ahead. There was no time to waste, no time for mistakes. As they moved deeper into the ship, they could feel the hum of the engine vibrating beneath their feet. The scout ship was alive, and it was preparing to take off again. Maya signaled for Eliza to cover her as she crouched down to examine a nearby control panel. It was a complex system, but Maya had seen it before. She had worked on enemy tech countless times in her past, and now it was her turn to turn the tables. She set to work, her hands flying over the buttons and switches, trying to disable the engines and weapon systems, all while listening for any sign of reinforcements. Eliza kept her weapon, raised her eyes darting between every shadow, every corner of the hallway. She couldn't afford to let her guard down. Not for a second she trusted Maya. But there was always the chance that someone would come out of the woodwork, and if they did, she would be ready. Maya's fingers paused for a moment. She had successfully disabled the weapon systems, but the engine was still active. If the ship could take off, it would be able to follow them once more, and that would spell disaster for the entire team. She needed to shut it down completely. She forced herself to calm her breathing steady and slow, and got to work. The seconds felt like hours, the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears as she focused all her attention on the task at hand. Meanwhile, Eliza's gaze never wavered, her rifle aimed at the door. The only way anyone could get in was through that hatch, and she was ready for them. When they did, Maya finally gave a small nod, signaling that she had the engine's power source in her sights. With a quick motion, she twisted a valve and yanked a lever, shutting the systems down. The sudden silence in the ship was deafening. Maya quickly moved to Eliza's side. They had done it. They had stopped the ship from leaving, but their job was far from over. The enemy would be coming for them soon, and they had to make sure the team was safe. They quickly moved back to the shuttle, their hearts racing with the urgency of the situation. As they crossed the gap between the two ships, they could see Riley in the cockpit, the shuttle's engines humming steadily as it stayed in position. Maya and Eliza landed hard on the shuttle's platform as it moved into place with swift movements. They climbed inside, the doors sliding shut behind them. The mission wasn't over yet, but it felt like a weight had been lifted. Maya gave Riley a quick nod. As they locked eyes, Riley didn't waste a second. She was already flipping switches and pulling levers to activate the shuttle's systems. Zoe was at the comms console, still working to make sure they weren't being tracked by anyone else. She glanced up briefly. "Good work, Maya." "Eliza," she said, her voice sharp and focused. Maya and Eliza didn't respond immediately. They were still catching their breath, still processing everything they had just done, but their focus shifted when Riley's voice came over the intercom. "The danger isn't over," she said. "We have to keep moving. We need to get the king to safety." The team was silent for a moment, but they all understood the gravity of the situation. They had accomplished something incredible, but their mission was not complete yet. Zoe brought up the map of the galaxy on the screen. The coordinates she had pinpointed took them far away from the reach of the enemy, but it would still be dangerous. The journey ahead was uncertain, but they would do it together. There were no more chances, no more mistakes, not after everything they had fought for. Riley adjusted the shuttle's course, and as they broke through the atmosphere, she took one last look at the fortress, fading into the distance. It was over for now, but she knew they weren't done. They had won this battle, But the war was far from finished. The teen remained silent as they flew into the vast unknown of space, each one of them, knowing the importance of what they had just done. They had saved the king, they had protected their future. But there was still so much more to fight for. Maya stood beside Riley, her expression determined. "We keep going," she said, "until the galaxy is safe. Until we are safe." They all nodded in agreement. The team had come together in the face of impossible odds, and now they would continue to fight, not just for survival, but for something greater, the future of their people.